The first time she noticed him, it was because the building was silent in a way it never was. The lights were still on in the executive wing long past midnight, rain streaking down the glass walls like restless thoughts, and yet the familiar hum of footsteps, mops, and carts had stopped. The silence pressed against her chest, heavy and unfamiliar, as if the building itself was holding its breath. She looked up from her laptop and realized the janitor, the man who always worked quietly, invisibly, faithfully, was standing frozen near the elevator, staring at a crumpled envelope in his hands as though it might fall apart if he breathed too hard. Something about that moment, raw and unguarded, cracked open a door she didn't even know existed. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet goodness that often goes unnoticed, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that humanity still shines in unexpected places. She was the CEO of one of the fastest growing companies in the city, a woman who had clawed her way up through boardrooms that doubted her, meetings that underestimated her, and headlines that loved to call her ruthless. Her name carried weight, her decisions moved markets, and her calendar was booked months in advance. Yet in that moment, watching a man in worn work boots clutch an envelope like it was his last lifeline, she felt smaller than she had in years. She cleared her throat softly, but he didn't notice. He was lost in something deeper, something that didn't belong to this polished building of glass and ambition. Over the following weeks, she couldn't stop noticing him. He arrived before dawn and left after midnight, his shoulders always tense, his eyes always tired, but there was a gentleness in the way he worked. He wiped fingerprints from glass as if erasing someone else's mistakes. He straightened chairs left crooked by exhausted employees. He hummed sometimes, barely audible, a low, steady sound that felt like a promise the world might still be okay. She learned his name from HR files she shouldn't have opened, but did anyway. Daniel. Single father. One child. No listed emergency contacts besides a school. Her own life, by contrast, was immaculate on paper and hollow in practice. Success had come at the cost of relationships, rest, and any illusion that money could buy peace. She told herself she was fulfilled, but the truth was she was numb. Watching Daniel, she began to feel something again. Curiosity first, then concern. Why did he look so thin? Why did his work shoes have holes worn through the soles? Why did he sometimes sit alone in the break room, counting coins with careful precision before slipping them back into his pocket? The answer came to her by accident. One afternoon, a junior accountant knocked on her office door, confused about a recurring payroll discrepancy. A portion of a janitor's paycheck was being redirected every month, exactly half, to a small nonprofit she vaguely recognized, an orphanage on the outskirts of the city. The accountant assumed it was an error. It wasn't. The numbers were precise, consistent, intentional. The CEO felt her breath catch. Half a paycheck from a man who already lived on the edge of survival. She drove past the orphanage that evening instead of going home. It was nothing like the glossy charity galas she attended. The building was old, paint peeling, playground rusted, but the windows glowed warm against the cold dusk. Inside, children laughed. Real, unfiltered laughter. She watched from her car as Daniel stepped out, his work uniform still on, carrying a bag of groceries. A small child ran to him and hugged his legs like he belonged there. In that moment, the truth hit her with a force that made her chest ache. This man wasn't donating out of excess. He was giving out of sacrifice. Daniel's life was a quiet storm of responsibility and loss. Years earlier, his wife had died suddenly, leaving him alone with a toddler and a grief that never quite loosened its grip. He took the janitor job because it offered stability, health insurance, and hours that allowed him to pick up his son from school. Every dollar mattered. Every decision was calculated. Yet when he learned about the orphanage struggling to keep its doors open, something in him refused to look away. He saw children who had lost everything, and he couldn't forget the fear in his own son's eyes after the funeral. Giving them half his paycheck wasn't generosity to him. It was survival of the soul. The CEO wrestled with what she had learned. Part of her wanted to intervene immediately, to write a check, to fix everything the way she fixed quarterly losses and PR crises. But something stopped her. This wasn't about her heroics. This was about understanding, about humility. She began small, asking facilities management about janitorial conditions, reviewing wages she hadn't questioned in years. The numbers looked clean, but the reality behind them was brutal. People like Daniel kept the company running while barely staying afloat themselves. As winter deepened, Daniel's struggles intensified. Heating bills rose. His son grew fast, outgrowing clothes faster than Daniel could replace them. There were nights Daniel skipped meals so his child could eat. Mornings he patched shoes with glue and hope. Still, every month half his paycheck went to the orphanage. The CEO watched this unfold from a distance, her respect turning into something heavier, responsibility. The breaking point came the night the building lost power during a storm. Emergency lights flickered on and chaos rippled through the floors. The CEO was there late again, reviewing contracts by flashlight, when she saw Daniel guiding employees safely down the stairs, calm and steady despite the darkness. Afterward, she found him sitting alone, head in his hands, exhaustion finally winning. She didn't announce herself this time. She sat across from him, not as a CEO, but as a human being who had seen enough. He didn't ask for help. He never would have. But she offered understanding. And in that space, something shifted. She realized leadership wasn't about distance. It was about proximity, about seeing the people who carried the weight of your success on their backs. What she did next changed everything, not in a single dramatic gesture, but in a series of deliberate choices. She restructured wages at the company's lowest levels, quietly at first, then transparently. She established a fund for employees facing hardship, seeded not with corporate branding, but with real money and real accountability. She partnered with the orphanage, not for publicity, but for sustainability, ensuring they had resources long after the spotlight moved on. And she made sure Daniel never knew the full extent of her involvement. Only that life slowly became less crushing. Daniel noticed the changes in small ways. His paycheck grew just enough to breathe. The orphanage stopped talking about closure. His son came home from school with a new jacket, paid for by a program Daniel didn't even know existed. The world didn't suddenly become easy, but it became kinder. And kindness, he knew, could be the difference between breaking and enduring. As for the CEO, the transformation was internal. For the first time in years, she slept through the night. She walked the floors of her building not as a figurehead, but as a listener. She learned names. She learned stories. The company thrived not despite these changes, but because of them. Productivity rose. Turnover fell. Something rare and powerful took root, a culture of dignity. Near the end of the year, she stood outside the orphanage again, this time not in her car but among the children, watching them play under newly repaired lights. Daniel was there too, his son laughing freely, unburdened. Their eyes met across the yard, and in that silent exchange was gratitude, respect, and a shared understanding that goodness doesn't need recognition to be real. If this story is touching something in you right now, if it's reminding you of the power one person's compassion can have, take a moment to engage with this video. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions help stories like this reach more hearts. And just before we end, I'd love to ask you something special. Please comment below with one act of kindness you believe can change someone's life. Big or small, every spark matters. Because in the end, the world isn't changed by the loudest voices or the biggest titles. It's changed by people like a single dad janitor who gave half of what he had so others wouldn't feel alone. And by someone powerful enough to finally notice, listen, and choose to care.